Hello everyone, and welcome back to just kind of a nice little walk and talk, kind of a, stream of consciousness thing, whatever this is that I'm doing. So I haven't come up with a good name for that. But anyway, so on the last time I did this, I thought I would talk about the Eightfold Path and things like that, but I think I've been doing some thinking, and with recent events, I think it might be best if I kind of wanted to talk about karma and how we think of that in our culture as opposed to how it's originally intended to be thought, or at least how I understand it these days. Um, and I guess um, I don't know if I should put like a trigger warning here. I feel like just about everybody knows about it at this point, but for those who don't know, Charlie Kirk was a right-wing political activist, I guess you could say, and he was, at time of recording, a couple, I want to say it's like a week and a half ago, I think, thereabouts, and he was killed while giving a talk, I think he was in the middle of a debate in Utah, something like that, and he was shot and killed, and I mean, I think there is a certain group of people to whom that is welcome news, certainly. And in online spaces, I have seen a lot of people not only celebrating his death, but also saying, like, oh, we need to get rid of the family too, like, and anyone associated with him. It's like, like that kind of, like, just openly being like, yep, this is a good thing, and we need to do it to as many people as possible. And so I'll be honest with you. I think, from what I know about Charlie Kirk, I would not have liked the things that he said very much. I really have not given much energy to him, just because I have very many other things that I prefer to focus on, and I just don't. I don't have the bandwidth to deal with someone like that. But nevertheless, I found myself embroiled in this news, as I think many of us were. And in particular, I found myself to be rather distressed by the ways that people have been reacting to them. And I'll circle back to this in a minute, but let me switch gears just a little bit and say, like, what is karma? So, when most people, in the United States at least, hear the word karma, they usually think something along the lines of, excuse me, they think, like, good people get good things, and bad people get bad things. Or maybe more succinctly, you get what you deserve, in essence. And I suppose that description isn't entirely without merit, but I do think it lends the wrong impression, and it kind of distracts people from the actual, at least the Buddhist teaching of that word karma. And so how I understand the word is basically that actions have consequences. Like, to put it the most simply, but to be maybe a little more precise, that because everything in our world is so interconnected, not just in the sense of, social media and the internet and all that, but it's always been interconnected, and that is part of the practice of Buddhism, is to really come to grips with this interconnectedness and understand it deeply. But because of that interconnectedness, your actions will spread and affect people around you, and more often than not, it will bounce back and affect you in ways that you don't foresee, and in ways that I would even go so far as to say aren't immediately obvious like they're not connected in some obvious and apparent way to the original action that you did. And that's why you have to be careful to keep an eye on yourself and make sure that you're staying on a path of wisdom and peace. And so why am I talking about this in the context of Charlie Kirk and the fallout thereof? I think there's kind of two sides to it, where I think the more obvious aspect would be how Charlie himself, quote unquote, got what he deserved, where he was advocating for some. Like I say, I have not really given him very much attention, so I don't know exactly the things that he has actually said. But if the things that I have heard about him are to be believed, and frankly, I do believe that they're at least true in part, if not in whole. Then people would say, well, I mean, of course he fostered this attitude of hate, so the people that he targeted, of course they're going to be upset, and of course one of them's going to do something about it. And so, like, that is an example of maybe obvious karma, where the things that he did directly led to something rebounding back on him, and feeds into this cycle, at least from a certain perspective, of course, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. But of course there's the opposite perspective of people who believe similarly to him, who don't see a good thing happening to a good person or a bad thing happening to a bad person, right? They see a bad thing happening to a good person. And not only that, but they see that it's quickly gone to the point where anyone even tangentially associated with him is also starting to have bad things happen to them, because, like I say, people have been going out and saying we need to target his family, his friends, everyone he's been associated with. Like they don't see that in the terms of the normal understanding of you get what you deserve, because in their view he didn't deserve that. And I think there's an argument to be had there, frankly. I am of the opinion that murder should never be accepted as a valid tool of discourse in any category, not just political. Frankly, I feel like that's self-evident, because it completely goes against the principle that the argument which is stronger is the one that wins. It's like, no, it's the one who is, quicker to draw their gun is the one who wins. And that, to me, that is not a valid argument, to put it mildly. And I guess to circle back to karma, what is... I talked about how people would perceive it as being karma, at least people who were against him politically, how they would perceive that as karma at work. And then the problem is that people who are aligned with him would not see that as karma, because they would like, if I were to say that's karma, they would say, no, how could you say that? Because, to them, like I say, it's a bad thing happening to a good person. It goes against the typical understanding of that principle. And so when I say that's karma, it's, like I said a minute ago, it's more in the sense that he... It's a little tricky, honestly, now that I think about it more closely, because I don't want to give the impression that, like, oh yeah, I totally agree with the people that are saying, like, he brought this on himself, but it's more like the way that he spoke contributed to a culture of division and hatred and antipathy towards certain select groups of people. And I think anyone who's in my age grade, like, well, frankly, like, I think anyone at this point who is of an age where they have seen the way that politics has gone in the last 20 years or so, they understand that this has only been getting worse over time, and he contributed to that. And so in that sense, he sort of fed this energy that's going around and making this thing more divisive, more antipathetic, I guess. I don't know if that's actually how you would phrase that, but you get my point. And so, yes, it is karma, but everything you do is karma, by definition, because the word itself just means action. But also, the principle of karma is more like just when you do something, it will necessarily, just by being part of the universe, affect everything around you. And so, like, it is karma in that sense. And I will only say that to someone in this context. Like, I will only use that word while explaining what I mean by karma, because most people in our culture understand the idea that I gave earlier, the basically you get what you deserve kind of layout, which is not something I really believe in anymore. Frankly, I don't even think I really subscribe to the idea of deserving anything for the most part, but that's kind of its own conversation. And so, there is that aspect of it, but what I find to be a little more troubling in terms of karma is the people who have been saying, like, I remember I saw a video of a woman saying, like, it's not enough to go after him, you gotta get his wife and his kids, who, as far as I know, his oldest kid is like 5. Like, we're not talking about, teenagers who have had a whole lot of life experience and could even reasonably, in any context, be understood to have any part in what he was doing and saying. Because they're kids, man. They're kids. They had nothing to do with this. Why are you saying that we need to get rid of his kids? And they're saying that because, like, they're just going to perpetuate his ideas. And it's like, I mean, you don't know that, frankly, in the most basic sense. But also, just like, I really don't think there's a way to put it more succinctly than they're kids, man. That's disgusting. It's a horrible thing to say about children, And frankly, like, you're no better than them when you let yourself be tainted by that kind of hatred. And that's not to say that to advocate for the deaths of the family of morally repugnant people are morally equivalent to the moral repugnancy that they spread. Because I don't believe in moral equivalence. I don't think that morality is something that you can quantify to such a degree that the word equate has any meaning. Like, I just think, like, it doesn't matter if you're saying it in the name of a good cause, it's still a horrible thing to say. And the consequences of it, there's kind of two aspects of it, where on the societal level, right, when you talk about someone in that kind of aspect, like I said, you were doing exactly what he was doing, where he was contributing to this energy that has only been growing over time of hatred, of antipathy, and of deciding that there are some people who deserve to be killed, who deserve to lose their life. And therefore, that it's okay and even good to kill someone if you don't agree with them. Which, phrase like that, I think most people would agree that is not acceptable. But then there's some people that will come back and say it is okay in the context of, like, I am so clearly and obviously right because the things that I am advocating for are freedom and kindness to other people, and that kind of thing. And for one thing, I would say, are you really advocating for freedom and kindness if you're accepting and tolerating of murder for holding opinions that you don't like? I don't think you are. I cannot agree that that is what you're doing. And you are, frankly, I would say, trying to hide behind morality as a shield for something that you know is repugnant in any other context. And so I was in a conversation with some people in Discord that I agree with politically. And frankly, in retrospect, I think I was a little lax on them because I was trying to say, like, no, I'm not saying you're a bad person for thinking this, but I am saying that you're doing unkindness to yourself. But I should have been more explicit about the fact that, yeah, I don't think that just because you think you're doing the right thing means that it's okay. Like, I don't, that does not follow, and it means that you are tainting your own soul. And I did say that, but I don't think I was as direct about it as I ought to have been. And so, I don't know, maybe that's worth me going back to. But in any case, in terms of, like, that I think is something I think a lot of people have cottoned on to. Like, I think anyone who takes politics seriously these days, they see this pattern too, and they can also see where I'm coming from, that you're feeding this cycle of hatred when you say things like that. And then I think the less obvious thing that I feel like maybe is Americans in particular, but I don't know, and could very well be something that's very much spread across the world, the Western world in particular, but is the idea, like, where I'm coming from, is in my own teaching, my learning, I am coming to the understanding that karma affects not just your outer world, but your inner world too, because those things are united. Even if there is the interface of your skin and your mind between them, they're still connected to each other. And it affects your inner world too. And so when you become, like, when you let anger affect you to that degree, it eventually leads to the point where you're willing to accept murder as a political tool. And then when you're ready to accept that, you are then also at a point where you are ready to, ramp up the scale, as it were. And it's like, even if I accept the argument that, people advocate, like, people saying, like, oh, I'm glad he's gone, are morally distinct. Like, there is a tangible, feasible difference between them and what he was saying. Even if I accept that argument, which I don't, I just don't accept that you can, like I say, I don't think you can quantify energy. Like, you can't quantify morality in that way. I just think that's the wrong way to think of morality as a concept, to be honest, but that, I think, is a discussion for another time. My point is that when you get to that point, even if you accept that argument, it does not change the fact that you are feeding that anger and leading yourself down a dark path. And you are desensitizing yourself and justifying to yourself and training yourself to accept these justifications for things that you would otherwise find abhorrent. And you are leading yourself down a path not only of, moral degradation if you subscribe to those kinds of arguments, but what I'm concerned about is you're leading yourself away from the peace, the vision of freedom that I have in mind, of specifically freedom from dukkha, which is the Sanskrit word that is usually translated into English as suffering in the context of Buddhist teaching. And I think that's not necessarily a bad word to choose, but I do think it is misleading in the sense that it sort of gives the impression of specifically like obvious anguish, not just in terms of physical pain, but also in terms of, like, you know, big big episodes of sadness and anger and things like that. It's not just those big flashy episodes. It's really something like, I would call it more like dissatisfaction, or you know, something to that effect. Something like the deep-seated feeling that something about life is wrong, incorrect, that it needs to be fixed, that sitting still is not an acceptable option, you know, and it stirs you up and it drives you away from the peace of stillness. And I've seen it, I watched it happen in real time, basically, where, like, one of these people that I was talking to, like, not, like, I think the first thing that kind of clued me into it was where we were having this discussion, and I was trying to get this idea across of, like, what you're doing is bad, even if you think you're doing it for the right reasons. And they were saying things like, you know, how dare you compare what he was saying to, you know, to trans rights or gay rights or anything like that. Like, how dare you? They phrased it more strongly than that, but I think you get the point that, you know, they were not happy that I was allegedly comparing these two things, when really what had happened was they were so angry, they had churned themselves up, that they had made up this scenario in their head about what I thought and what I said, and they couldn't see what I actually said. And granted, part of that may have been my own lack of skill in communicating it. Like, I definitely don't discount that possibility. That has happened before. But nevertheless, it was quite apparent that this person was all too quick to put words into my mouth. And that sort of kind of set me off a little bit. Like, that rang some alarm bells in my head, because it was like, again, it's something that I've been cognizant of for a little while now, that I've been kind of trying to learn about. But also, I was talking to them later, and they were talking about how, like, they think that value is derived from spreading out and imprinting yourself into as much of the universe as possible, basically, is the idea that I got. Like, the glorious future that we as a species need to strive for is to spread throughout the cosmos and consume everything that we can. Like, they didn't put it in these terms, but this did appear to be the idea they were getting at, is like, I guess if I want to be more charitable to them, which I do want to be charitable, I think what they were getting at was, we need to continue to grow and learn and explore and learn how to be kind and spread goodness throughout the universe, throughout as much of it as is possible. And, like, if you, like, I think that's a pretty common sentiment these days, especially with, you know, interplanetary travel. It's possible for unmanned probes, and by appearances, you know, we are at a stage where we are confident that we have the ability to do manned interplanetary missions, but we just need to figure out how to do it safely. Like, that's the phase we feel we are at right now. And so, of course, like, these sorts of ideas of spreading around throughout the universe and spreading ourselves and our imprints across the universe these are things that are on people's mind these days, and I can't fault them for that. But I point out that even humanity as a whole, even if we assume that humanity will survive into the dying days of the universe, it will all boil down to nothing. And that is discounting any atrocity, any random mishap even. Like, you know, an asteroid that we didn't see could, you know, it could slam into the Earth in a year's time and wipe us out, you know, before we even get that chance. And, you know, if we grow and spread, you know, maybe we'll get embroiled in some kind of intergalactic war and get wiped out that way or something like that. It's like any number of things could happen to us to stop us from achieving that. And then what? Like, the universe is just going to keep on going. So obviously this thing you're proposing isn't some kind of, like, objective good. It's not something that the universe must attain to, because it will function just fine without us. It has no problem with that. So if we say that it is what's the word? It is something that we choose for ourselves, then you will notice that it is an objective that will never end, because we will always find something new to explore and learn, and conquer and consume, if that is the route we go down, which the two are not contradictory. Like, chances are we'll do both. We're doing that right now. We are both, you know, consuming everything around us, but we're also learning a great deal about the world around us. And there are a lot of people that treat the world as something interesting to learn about and enjoy and love, for lack of a better word. Sorry, I'm gonna take a quick little shortcut. We'll go to Liyue for a bit. But anyway, that goal, like, I think we are misguided. Like, we're not at a point where we can work on that. Like, we don't have the right mindset, basically, in my estimation. And I hesitate to use the word right, because it does sort of imply something objective, which is something that I don't think actually exists. But I think that if we go at it with the mindset that we currently have, the natural consequence of it is that we will never find peace, because we will always be chasing something, right? Like, we'll always be looking, instead of enjoying what we have, we'll always be saying, yes, but there's more out there for us to reach, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but we as society, and I have met very few people who have this mindset of, like, what we have is enough. I can live a happy life with this. And if it turns out tomorrow that we actually prove that we already know everything we could ever possibly know, like, I'm okay with the way we're living right now, more or less. Like, I in the sense that I don't feel the need to go out and conquer more stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's... Let me back up a bit. There are a few people who I think approach this from the mindset of, let's go out and explore the universe, because the universe is a cool place to be in, and I would like to explore it. And see what's out there, and find new friends out there in the universe, basically. You know, like, we come at it as, we need more resources to fuel our expansion. We need more and more and more and more. We always need more. There's never enough. We need to grow forever and consume forever. And even people who think that they don't have that mindset, oftentimes they do, they just don't frame it in those kinds of direct ways. They frame it in the sense of, we are obligated to do everything in our power to advance our species. And that sounds noble, certainly. And I'm not going to tell you it's a bad thing, because, again, I don't believe in good and bad as, like, things that you can just, like, tag onto things. It's not like that. It's more like, if that is your attitude, you're still coming at this from the perspective of someone, you know, who is greedily eyeing all the gems in the dragon's hoard, but they're doing it so, oh, I can bring it back for my community and be hailed as a hero and become rich and powerful. Like, it's that kind of slippery slope, you know. It's that same hunger, even if you disguise it in you know, in glory talk. And I don't buy it, honestly. I do think there are some people who believe it in their heart of hearts, but I just don't think that is the way to attain what you're after. And certainly it's not the way that you're going to find peace, because, like I say, you are instilling in yourself the idea that it's never enough, that there is always something that you have to get at, or else. You know, you will never find peace with that kind of attitude. And, you know, this particular person that I'm thinking of,
such fair weather.
I have not spoken to them verbally. I've only communicated with them over text. So it is rather hard to tell their personality through that, but they do strike me as the sort of person that doesn't really much care about inner peace in that sense, and who really does think that if you justify it with something bigger than yourself, then that makes it okay to sacrifice anything that it takes. And that there is no merit to the argument that when you promote these ideas, or even if you don't try to say this is not wisdom, like they think that if you step aside and let it happen, that's okay because it's the right thing to do, because it is in the service of something that is right. They have almost said as much to me, almost in those words. And I don't think I'm misrepresenting them there, because they have said things to me like I say, this is the same person that I was talking about earlier that said, how dare you compare me celebrating his death to the horrible things that he said. And that's just another way of saying I do think that it's valid to put this poison in me if it's for a good cause, if it's for the cause of quote-unquote righteousness. And I think they missed the point, because I think they were focusing more on the righteousness rather than the peace. And there was a whole discussion about you know, doing what's right and doing horrible things in the name of that. But I think that's maybe beyond my scope here. Although I'd be interested in that discussion too, if I got the sense that it was being had in good faith. And I am presently, I'll be honest, not in the mood to accept that it would be in good faith right now. And I'm sure I'll come around to it. It's just like right now, I don't think I could have that discussion in good faith. I'm a little upset with this whole situation that's broiling right now. And I'm kind of upset with the people that I was talking with. And I'm not capable of having that discussion. But, like I say, maybe someday soon. But, in any case, that's kind of what I was thinking in terms of... I got a little sidetracked, I realized. I didn't even really transition as I had hoped to. But I hope my point about karma was clear, that, like,
I'll catch up.
even if you don't directly see the connection between you celebrating Kirk's death and the increasing violence that we've been seeing over the years, and the increasing hatred and name-calling and finger-pointing that we've been seeing, and, you know, if in 5 years' time it only gets worse, You know, people may not necessarily see the connection to that, but the point of karma is that these things are connected, even if we can't see them. And they're connected in ways that, frankly, I think are fairly obvious and self-explanatory. But that could also just be a function of me, you know, taking a look at things in that context, like I am explicitly trying to find those kinds of connections, as opposed to some other people who are just trying to, excuse me, maybe come to a conclusion as to what to do, you know? Like, how do I respond to this here and now? Whereas I'm more thinking of this like, how does this stem from the past, and how will this lead to the future? You know? And that's not to say that, you know, I'm so enlightened that I can think of it in this context, and they're so dim-witted that they can't. It's more just like, I have taken the time to try and frame things in that way. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is, I'm coming at this from the perspective of, this is how I understand the term karma. This is what I'm concerned about, and I'm hoping that I'm using that term correctly. And at the very least, I'm hoping that you understand the definition that I'm using, where your actions will ripple outward and affect the world around you, even in ways that you don't necessarily see very clearly. And so, but there are still ways that are fairly clear. Like, for instance, when you go out and you say, "I'm glad this person was killed. I think it's great that this person that I disagree with was killed." Like, I think there's a fairly obvious connection to that, but like between that and people doing it more often in the future, and it getting more and more common. You know, like, I don't think that's a big stretch. I don't think I'm making some kind of revolutionary proposition here, you know? I think that's fairly obvious and straightforward. And maybe I'm just getting cynical in the wake of all this, but I feel like that very obvious fact is either not being seen or is being ignored in the name of saying, I don't care because I'm just too happy that he's gone. And I don't care about building up my own peace because I'm fighting for what's right. And that worries me. And I don't know, maybe you've had the same thought, maybe it worries you too. And I guess to that end, I would say that I have been kind of struggling with this, and I even alluded to it the last time I did this little thing, whatever it is I'm doing right now, where I was saying, like, I struggle with the notion that there's all these things going on, and it seems to me like there is a very easy solution to at least get people on the right track. Like, even if you don't ascribe to any particular Buddhist teachings, I think the principle of cultivating peace within yourself is pretty obvious. But I don't know, maybe, like, I think I'm the weird one here, to be honest. I think there's something in me that makes this more obvious to me than as opposed to most people. And again, I'm not saying this to, like, praise myself. I'm saying it because, like, I really can't think of any other explanation other than, like, the only other explanation is that I really am smarter than them, or I really am more in tune with this. No, I guess I am saying that I'm more in tune with this. But I don't want it to seem like I'm saying it's because I'm better than them. I don't think it's because I'm better than them. I think by some weird circumstance I'm just more inclined to think in these ways, you know? And honestly, I find it pretty alienating. I feel pretty alone a lot of the time. I feel like even before I really started practicing Buddhism and meditation and stuff like that, I've always felt kind of alone. And I understand that it manifests in some negative qualities in me, but for the most part, I think it's because there are some things that make it easier for me to come to terms with myself. Like, I am more at peace with myself than I think a lot of people are and are willing to come to cultivate in themselves. And I think a lot of people are more willing to accept a connection to the world that is more like seeking validation and satisfaction from the outside, as opposed to cultivating it from the inside. And that has never resonated with me. But even more so, now that I've been on this path, and I have seen these principles that are very old, over 2,000 years old at this point. And I see it, and I just, even though I know there are people out there who are like me, I don't see it. And it's disheartening, for the most part, truly. But I am sort of trying to maintain an attitude of, if I cultivate my garden and I invite people to walk with me in my garden, and they see how nice it is, they might be inspired to cultivate their own garden, and then they in turn will inspire others around them. And maybe they won't. Like, that's the other thing that kind of worries me a little bit is, maybe my presentation style, or maybe it's just because they're just not in a place where they feel like they're able to do that. Whatever reason, they walk in my garden and they say, yeah, I don't really, I'm not interested, and nothing changes. But frankly, like, even that solution, like, I'm trying to have to learn to, I don't want to say ignore, because those people, I still want to help them if I can, and I still want to extend kindness to them, and they're not wrong for not being in the right state of mind. And even if they are doing terrible things, I still want to extend kindness to them, because I believe that if you're good to only people who are good to you, or even if you're only good to good people, you're not a good person. You're a conditionally good person. You're a good person when you're good to everyone. And that doesn't mean letting everyone do whatever they want, but it does mean that, like I said earlier, I don't think I would have liked Charlie Kirk. From everything I've heard about him, I don't think I would have liked the things that he said. And frankly, I would have thought that he was a terrible, like, overall, he was a terrible influence on society. But that doesn't mean that I revel in his death, and it doesn't mean that I can't extend my sympathies to his wife and his children, and it doesn't mean that I'm okay with these sorts of things, Like, there's a difference between being kind and being accepting. And I think that's something that a lot of people know, but don't implement in a way that will lead to peace. But in any case, my channel, as of the time of this recording, is fairly small. We've got a nice little community going here at this point. And frankly, I'm proud of the people that, they come here and they enjoy my content, and I love that. I hope that, if they're just sitting there watching me play games, then they enjoy that. Like, even if they don't have any interest in this sort of side of it, just the fact that I'm making stuff that people seem to enjoy, I'm grateful for that. I'm glad to be able to do that. And I'm hoping that at least some people will resonate with this sort of thing, and we can prop each other up and help each other tend to our gardens and build something beautiful. And I think something to keep in mind is that just the nature of the universe is constant motion. We will never get to a point where everybody is saved. That's just not how it works. But that's not the point either. The point is not to go out and conquer everything. The point is to go out and make friends, to make a positive change in the universe. And, you know, the Buddha Gautama, he came to these realizations 2,000 years ago. It's been 2,000 years and it's still not been fixed, and we've had this stuff written down almost that entire time. You know, like, it's not like this isn't out there. It's just that that's just not how the world operates. And I am having trouble coming to terms with that, to be honest. But that's okay. When I have these troubles, I meditate. And I bring myself back to center. And the conclusion that I'm coming to is, it may not be the case that I will ever succeed, but that's okay, because success isn't the point. The point is that I'm coming at this and trying to make a positive impact. And that, like, look at what we've built. Our community is still a little small at this point, but like I say, I like to think that people enjoy the content that I put out. And even that little bit of extra little joy that I put out of the world is nice. It's good, and I'm happy for it. I'm proud of it. And it's not like, the fact that it's only a small community right now doesn't mean a lot, because it's a community of people who are enjoying something, and that's good. And I'm like I say, I'm happy for that. I'm proud of that. And then to expand that further, like I say, is if this catches on, and if I can refine my own methods, if people are, you know, like, if we can cultivate that sort of environment where people reach out and they're happy and we're communicating with each other and we're working together to build this thing, you know, it will turn into something bigger, and that's great too. But for now, like, something I'm struggling with, something else rather that I'm struggling with, is like the idea that every time I try to communicate these ideas to the people in my life, people that I care about, I don't seem to get the point across. And I don't know if it's because I'm doing something that's not helping them, or if they're just not in a position where they're willing to examine these things and they take it seriously, or what. Like, I don't know what it is, but I do run into a lot of difficulties, and I struggle with like, when that happens, when I try to encourage a more wise and peaceful way of approaching a problem, and I am rebuffed, I suppose, it's disheartening, and it makes me feel like maybe I am doing more harm than good. You know, even if I have good intentions, am I really doing something that's helpful, or am I just putting into their minds, even if I don't mean it this way, am I making them think that I'm judging them and telling them that they're doing something wrong when that's not what I mean? You know, like, this self-doubt gets in my way. And like I say, these are people that I care about, that I am. The reason I'm reaching out in the first place is because I want them to feel better, but I am also keenly aware that the methods that I am using may well only work for me. Oh, well, I guess let's go help these. And it's, I don't know. That's why I'm hoping that this kind of more passive approach maybe will offer another solution. You know, it's here if you want it. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to offer my perspectives. And the fact that it's asynchronous in this format right now, maybe that's a good thing. Because it means that, you know, I'm not judging you, and it means that it feels less personal if if I feel like I get that sensation that I'm doing more harm than good, or anything like that, like it could be a positive thing. Like maybe this is the solution that I've been looking for, and I just don't see it so well yet. But I don't know. That's kind of what's been on my mind in terms of this project. But I guess circling back to the idea of, um, you know, the perspective that people have when I'm going to grab these real quick. When it comes to going out and exploring the universe in the name of the glory of mankind or whatever, or the perpetuation of our species, things like that. I recently came across a song. It's not a recent song. I'm pretty sure it's been around since the early 2000s, but oh, excuse me. It's "Ruler of Everything" by Tally Hall, and it's a fascinating song. Like it's just got a weird and interesting sound to it. It's just a cool song, frankly. But I listened to the song, and then there was an analysis. I believe the channel was Mark But Evil, and I'll post a link in the description if I remember. But it's this interpretation of the song, which sounds pretty right to me, is that it is basically a dialogue between time, the personification of time, and Juno, who is the personification of humanity as a whole. And like it starts off with Juno being like, they're propping themselves up, and they're concerned about their self-image and things like that, and focused on the things that they think will make them important. And time comes in and says, like, in the end, I'm the ruler of everything. You are nothing in the face of the universe. And there's a bit in this song, like the tempo speeds up and the lyrics speed up, and that's my favorite part. Honestly, it's really cool. But that is, I think, the moment of epiphany for the character of Juno, and the line that keeps, like, it's stuck in my head is, do you hear the clock stop when you reach the end? No, you know it must be never ending. And, like, to me, that's the moment where they realize, like, no, the clocks don't stop when I die. The clocks keep going because time is so much bigger than humanity. And as a whole, like I say, the song is basically time, like the personification of time, dressing down humanity, and saying you are not important in the grand scheme of things. But I've been thinking about, like, I've been obsessed with this song for like a week now, and I've been thinking, like, why am I so interested in this song? Not just because it's a weird sound and I like it, but also because I don't think I agree with the sentiment that it ends up on, or seems to end up on, in my estimation, that we don't matter. And what I think it is an extension of what I was trying to say earlier, where it's like, the only reason, like, okay, so there are a lot of people that are still stuck in the state that Juno is early on in the song, where he's talking about how cool he is, and all the awesome stuff he has, and is very superficial and very much about outward appearances. Like, there are a lot of people that are still stuck in that, but then there are also a number of people who think that they have seen clearly that humanity doesn't matter, and maybe they have an existential breakdown, as one might. Excuse me. When frankly, I feel like I'd have some kind of breakdown if I were approached by the personification of time and dressed down and told I was insignificant. But if we look at it a little less literally, there are a lot of people who do see the grander scale of things, and don't think that humanity matters. on the grand scheme of things. And there are further still people who say, yes, but it still matters how we treat each other. So it matters now, you know. And I would argue that that final conclusion is important, yes, but I don't think that's the solution that a lot of people who are still stuck in that everything is meaningless phase would really want to hear. Excuse me. Or be very receptive to. And it's really not why they got into that position in the first place. I think if you are of the sort of person that is expanding like that, you are asking these kinds of questions and looking for an answer to these kind of questions. And I think you are looking too far away from where you are right now. And what you do now with the people around you is what matters. And it matters insofar as anything can matter. Insofar as the word matter in that context is even, like, valid, you know? Like, it matters to people. And that's what makes it matter at all. Even if it doesn't affect the grand scale of the universe, it still matters. Because you're doing good by the people around you, and it is experience that determines what matters, quote unquote. And that's the reason why we have to personify things like time in order to say that things do or don't matter. But I have been coming to the conclusion lately that even that's not... Excuse me. Maybe it's not necessarily that it isn't a complete picture, but it's not the only answer. And I think the other answer that I'm coming to is that when you say that humanity doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the universe, it is because you are assuming that importance, that mattering, is necessarily identified with leaving your mark on the universe. And that's not what it means, I don't think. It is coming at this with the assumption that importance and consequence is defined by how much you consume, how far you spread, and things like that. But that's not the only way to define what matters, you know? And I think that can be tied into the other perspective, that what matters is the way we treat our people. But I think more pertinently, it's just that, like, the reason you're feeling, you know, in a crisis is because you've defined your terms poorly. It's because you think that that's what it means to matter, and I encourage you to examine that and see that not only is that not what it means to matter, but there are other ways of defining what matters. There are a multitude of ways. Sorry, I'm kind of thinking this. I'm thinking on the fly a little bit here, but like, hopefully I'm getting my point across, that it's like when you come at this with the presumption that that's what it means to be important, then of course you're going to come to the conclusion that humanity doesn't matter in the long run, because humanity could never matter in that way in the grand scheme of the universe, because eventually everything we ever do is going to dissolve into I don't know what you'd call the end state of the universe. Entropy soup, maybe? I don't know. But, like, you know, everything we ever build will crumble. Every human will die out. Our bones will be returned to atoms. Even the planets we settle on will all be ground to dust. All the stars will flicker out and die. And it's even possible that all the protons in every atom in the universe will eventually dissolve and degrade back into just pure energy. And time will go on. And so it's only when you mark out importance in terms of these physical things, or even abstract but nevertheless impactful accomplishments. When you define that as what matters, then of course you don't matter in the context of the greater universe, because the universe goes on forever, so far as we can tell, or at the very least it will certainly go on for longer than humans will ever be able to actually go. Or at least almost certainly. Like, it certainly seems that way for now. Like, maybe that'll change in the future. But, nevertheless, as far as we can tell right now, there is no escape from the final end. But that's okay. Because that comes from you getting so caught up on this particular definition of importance, of mattering. And so, there's no need to get yourself so caught up. And I don't know. I think there's a lot to be gained from in our present state of the world from really examining the way that we think about things that we consider important. Not just in the sense of, is it really important in the long run, but what do we mean by in the long run? What do we even mean by my own importance? What do we mean by my, or me, or I? You know, these are questions that have been addressed by certain people throughout history, and I think we could learn a lot by taking that idea to heart, that maybe our assumptions are wrong, and maybe we would benefit from closer examination. But I don't know. Go listen to the song. It's a cool song. Go listen to the analysis. Link will be in the description if I remember. I like it. It was a cool song, and it really got the brain juice flowing. So yeah, I don't know. On the previous thingamabob, I said that I would talk about the Eightfold Path and things like that, and then this whole Charlie Kirk thing happened. And I realized that I think I would be better served addressing that in some way. Just because it has been on my mind lately, and I kind of want to unburden myself a little bit, if you'll forgive me for that. But I guess the overall point that I want to take away is, first of all, always be on the lookout for those instances of rage and of justifying terrible things, even if you think that you have a valid justification, because that doesn't change the fact that what you're doing is terrible and not bringing you peace. And that being said, if you do catch yourself thinking these things, you're not a bad person for thinking them. Oh, they're down there. But, like, oh, goodness gracious. I'm going to get off this bridge real quick. Sorry. Interrupted a bit there. You're not a bad person for thinking them, and I don't want to give that impression. Because that is something else that needs to be let go, is our propensity for judging everyone and everything around us as good and bad, and that too drives the cycle of lack of peace in the mind, right? Because you're always trying to move towards the things that you think are good and away from the things that you think are bad, and you will find that peace comes when you learn to let that go. And of course, the natural question might be, why would I struggle for peace? And it's like, why is peace something to aim for and not anything else? And the answer is, I mean, it's not so much that, so much as, like, I mean, there is some merit to that, I think. But I'm not proposing this as a, like, my ideas are better than your ideas. I'm saying this in the sense of, you can cultivate peace in yourself, and from there we can learn to make more wise decisions, because we're not so pulled around by our justifications, by our desires, our hatred, things like that. So I'm sorry, I got sidetracked again. I guess, like I say, the takeaway is, Just be on the lookout for these things. If you catch them, don't berate yourself for them, because they're natural. I do think this is all a natural part of being human, and it's, again, I don't believe in objective morality. I don't think that things are right or wrong in any, like, real, tangible sense. It's just that if you are looking for wisdom and peace, be keeping an eye out for that and not letting them control you, and also not giving in to the self-hatred that comes when you have this realization. That's all a part of that. And in terms of, I suppose you might say, the futility of the scale of this project, I think reorienting our terms into thinking that this is not a matter of success and failure. It's not a matter of, if I am successful, I will turn everybody in the world into what I envision. It's not like that. It's more like, am I making a difference in people's lives? You know? And like I said, even if our community is relatively small right now, even if you get nothing out of my channel other than just the gaming stuff that I do, like, you know, it's still something. It's small, but it's something, and that in and of itself has value. And if there's a way we can get more value out of it, then great, let's pursue that. But let's not get so caught up in this idea that there is an end state, because frankly I don't think there is. But let's not get so caught up in whether or not there is, or the idea that there could be, that we forget to just look for ways to, like, free ways to make a difference in people's lives. Like I say, it costs me next to nothing to do this channel, and I like to think that it is positive for at least some people out there, and I'm happy for that. And I hope that that's something that a lot of people can resonate with. And so, yeah, I guess maybe next time, if I remember, one of these days, I swear, I will get to the Eightfold Path, and I will talk about that in detail, because it is very interesting, and it is something else that I think we could use some reframing on. But I think I've just been waffling on for too long now. But I don't know. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the scenery with me. I realize I kind of naturally just, like, look straight ahead, so I haven't really taken the time to enjoy the scenery too much, but I have been trying. So I hope you've enjoyed what's been here, and I hope you'll join me on the next one. And as always, a link to the Discord will be in the description. I will, and I'll try to keep an eye out for people who have questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And yeah, we'll see where it goes from here. So I guess until next time, I wish you peace, and I'll see you later.